Good evening, everyone. It is now 7 o'clock and we'll call this meeting to order of Mapleton Council dated October 11th, 2022. I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. It's good to see people here again this week for another one of our meetings. If you have a cell phone, please make sure it's on silent so we don't hear any dinging or ringing while we have our meeting. And at this time, I'll invite everyone to stand for O Canada. Any declaration of pecuniary interest tonight? Seeing none, we have confirmation of minutes. Moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Douglas, that the minutes of the Township of Mapleton Council meeting held on September 13th, 2022 be confirmed as circulated in the agenda. Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. We don't have any matters arising from the minutes. We'll move on to item number 6, which is matters under the Planning Act. Item 6.1. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear comments from the public and agencies and to give consideration to application ZBA 2022-08 for proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The subject lands are located at Part Lot 10, Concession 2, 6471 Wellington Road 12. The purpose and effect is to allow expansion of existing home industry, a woodworking shop. We will now hear from the clerk regarding statutory requirements.
Thank you, sir. Staff can confirm proper postings and agencies were circulated on September 20th. There were no issues or concerns. GRCA comments were received and included in the agenda package. County of Wellington planners comments were received and included in the agenda package. And there were no comments received from ratepayers.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Now I'll hear from the planner, Linda Redmond. Linda, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. This application is an extension of an existing home industry. The home industry was established prior to 2010, and it met the criteria at the time of that first addition. They now want to expand it. This application, you'll see in my report, I've shown they have a current expansion they'd like to pursue, but then also they have a future expansion that they want to include in this application as well. The one thing I just want to point out about this application is that the current home industry criteria requires that the home industry building is constructed separate from any accessory or farm buildings. This one is existing. It exists as part of a farm building. That a portion of it, there's a basement area, and the portion they're moving into is used for farm purposes, and it is attached to the home industry. It operates as one building now. That was done under the old criteria when we didn't require the separation. The separation came into effect under the new current bylaw. So prior to that, a home industry could be built in conjunction with a farm shed. So this is an existing situation. They are expanding on that. And so that's why we aren't as, you're going to see later in the meeting, there's another one for a same scenario, but it's a brand new building. So there's a different expectation there. So in this case, we have no concerns with what they're asking for. And also, as a bylaw has not been drafted at this point, but is forthcoming pending council's discussion.
Thank you, Linda. Does the applicant, Solomon Martin, or the owners, Elvin and Adina Bowman, have any further comments or explanation? Nothing? Thank you. Any comments from those in attendance? Please indicate so and state your name and address for the record. We will first hear from those in support of the zoning amendment. Anybody wishing to speak in support of the zoning amendment? Anybody here wishing to speak opposed to the zoning amendment? Any questions from council members? This public meeting then is now concluded. Thank you for attending the public meeting. Item 6.1 moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Otten, that the planning report regarding ZBA 2022-08, part lot 10, concession 2, RP 61R10847, part 1, we be received for information. All in favor? It's carried. We'll now move on to the next item, item 6.2. Sorry. Yes, we're going to move 6.2 later. We're going to go to 6.3. The 6.2 and 6.4, I think it is, or 5 that are similar. So we're going to move 6.2 down. So we'll go to item 6.3. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear comments from the public and agencies and to give consideration to an application ZBA 2022-10 for proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The subject lands are located at part lot 1, concession 12, 8692, concession 12. The purpose and effect is to prohibit any future residential development. We'll now hear from the clerk.
Thank you, sir. Staff can confirm that proper postings and agencies were completed on September 20th. There were no issues or concerns. County of Wellington planners' comments are in the agenda package, and there were no ratepayers' concerns expressed.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll now hear from our planner, Linda Redmond.
Through you, Mayor, this is your standard surplus farm dwelling severance restriction. That's all it is. There's nothing else included in this application.
Thank you, Linda. Do the applicants Greg Ford and Gwen Poot of the Mapleton Layer Farms Limited have any comments or further explanation? No. Okay. Any comments for those in attendance? Please indicate so and state your name and address for the record. First, hearing those in support of the amendment. Anybody here wishing to speak in support of the amendment? Anybody here wishing to oppose the amendment? Any questions from members of council? The public meeting is now concluded. Thank you for attending. Six point three first, sir. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Otten, that the planning report regarding ZBA 2022-10, part lot 1, concession 12, municipally known as 8692, concession 12, be received for information. All those in favor? It's carried. We'll now go to 6.4. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear comments from the public and agencies and to give consideration to an application ZBA 2022-11 for proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Subject lands are located at West Part Lot 11, concession 1, 8309 Wellington Road 86. Purpose and effect is to allow a home industry. We'll now hear from the clerk regarding statutory requirements.
Thank you, sir. Staff can confirm that proper postings and agencies were circulated on September 20th, and there were no comments or concerns. The GRCA was circulated. Their report is received and in the agenda package. County of Wellington planners have submitted a report in the agenda package, and there were no comments from ratepayers.
Thank you. Linda will now have your comments, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the application I was referring to a few minutes ago. This is a new home industry that's being established on this farm. The use is for the assembly, bagging, and assembly of I guess they get cat litter, and then they bag it, and then it goes off to be sold elsewhere offsite. So the applicants are asking for a considerably sized building of approximately 7,200 square feet, which is not out of range for what we've been seeing. And some employees, I believe. So the use and the size of the building they're proposing is not of a concern. It meets all the PPS criteria for home industries. The only issue that I want to raise with council is that they are asking to include this square footage within a farm shed. So they are proposing to build a 12,000 square foot building, 7,200 square feet of which would be for the home industry, and the remaining would be for hay storage and implement storage. The issue with this is that the bylaw requires that the buildings be separate from home industry buildings, standalone essentially, because the issue is that the concern is that the home industry will expand and grow into that existing building as has happened in the past. And when we were redoing the zoning bylaw in 2010, this came up as a concern at that time, and that's why that provision was added. So I just want to raise that to council. You know, it would just become an enforcement issue. We can't pre-zone for enforcement issues, but that's why that provision is in place.
Thank you, Linda. Do the owners, Florence and Edgar Martin, have any comments? Nothing? Thank you. Well, any comments from those in attendance, please indicate so and state your name and address for the record. We're first here and those in support. Anybody here wishing to speak in support of the application? Anybody here wishing to speak opposed to the application? Questions, comments from council? Seeing none. This public meeting is now concluded. Thank you for attending the public meeting. The resolution here, moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Douglas, that the planning report regarding ZDA 2022-11, West Part Lot 11, Concession 1, municipally known as 8309 Wellington Road 86, be received for information. Councillor Martin.
How do we ensure that we?
Sorry.
How do we ensure that thank you, Mr. Mayor, how do we ensure that the concerns of the planner are addressed while receiving this for information?
Great question. Do you have an answer? I don't have an answer.
I wanted to raise it. It's, you know, council's decision, how they want to proceed. If you're in support of the home industry, that's great. If you're okay with it being part of a farm building, then we just have to include that as part of the zone, the draft bylaw, that it can exist together with a farm building. If you aren't in support of that, then the draft bylaw would not include that, and they'd have to build the building separate.
A partition in between the two areas would still, like I said, of having two separate buildings, would a partition between the two, that's a solid partition, be any different?
Yeah, it would. And also, you know, a home industry can expand without approvals anyways, whether it's the buildings together or not together. So you can't, you know, I guess we could ask the applicants if it's possible to build a separate building apart from one another, but yeah, I don't know.
Anything further from council? Council Martin, any follow-up on that? I know we've talked about this before.
And no, I mean, I should have done this during the public meeting, to be honest, but do we know during the application process if the applicant has indicated a desire to expand down the road? And that this ag-related use would be temporary, or any indication one way or another?
There was no indication of that. And also, it wasn't until the application was made that we were made aware that this structure was going to be built together like that. I didn't realize that that was going to happen.
Council Douglas?
Excuse me, I just wonder if it'd be worth checking with the building official, if you built a masonry firewall, building on the other comment, to define separate building uses with a firewall is often an option. Might be one way to handle it.
It's kind of what I was trying to get at, something to separate between the two. That'd be up to council to make sure that's put in as part of the application or the process. So if council wants to consider that, have that separated wall as being, how we're going to distinguish between the two buildings. But
If that's council's desire to move in that direction, this application would be required to go through site plan approval. So it's at that time that we can ensure that the building plans provide that separate wall and built as a solid separate wall. And then we would just include that in the amending bylaw.
thank you. Is that council's desire then? If Councilor Craven shaking her head, yes. Councilor Ottens?
Thank you. Is there a specific reason, maybe the applicant could answer this, why this is being done with one building when it typically is done separately? Is like, I'm looking at the footprint of the farm here. I don't see where it's gonna go, but is it just because it's a tight layout here and that's all the space, or there may be an extenuating reason?
Sir, would you like to speak to that, please? Just go to the mic and push the button.
Hello, everybody. I guess the reason is just because of the building layout and there's creeks not too far away, and I have to stay away from the creeks, and it just wasn't sure where to put a separate building. It just all around makes more sense if I could make it all in one building. And it's already, I didn't send in my application yet, or like for my permit, but there will definitely be a firewall in between between the machinery storage shed and the home industry building.
Thank you. If we can make sure it's council's desire to have that, and our applicant said he's going to do it, make sure it's just part of that zoning application and the zoning site plan approval. There you go. Perfect. If we make sure that's part of the site plan approval, then that'd be great. Thank you. Any further questions from council then? And all those in favor? Thank you. Now, Mr. Clerk, we go back to 6.2.
I believe so.
Okay. So number 6.2, this is a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear comments from the public and agencies and give consideration to an application ZBA 2022-09 for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Subject lands are located at part lot 19, concession 16385 Yatton Side Road. Purpose and effect is to allow a manufacturing use plus a residence and a horse and buggy barn. We'll now hear from the clerk on statutory requirements. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, sir. Staff can confirm proper postings and agencies were circulated on September 20th with no issues or concerns expressed. County of Wellington planners have submitted a report. It's in the agenda. And there were no comments from the ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll now hear from planner Linda Redmond.
Thank you, Mayor. So this application, you're going to see they're doing a lot line adjustment. You'll see that later in the meeting. To add a portion of land to the property. Currently, as you can see, the driveway crosses over the trail lands. The lot line adjustment will provide an opportunity for that driveway to be relocated off of the neighbor property, which it crosses over now. So we're happy about that. That's a good thing. And then the long building that's located on that property is going to be removed. And in place of that, they're proposing to construct a 5,037 square foot building for a industry. So the property currently has a zoning on it, a very, very, very old zoning that allows a small industry use. So essentially they're just asking to amend what is already like a use that's already permitted. The application was made with the request to rezone it to an R1N, which is rural industrial, and then also allow a residence. Currently, there is a residence on the property as well. This property is located in Wallenstein. It's in a hamlet. The application made reference to allowing a home industry on the property, but it's technically not a home industry. Home industries are permitted on agricultural parcels, on farm parcels in the prime ag area. So it wouldn't be considered a home industry. You're in a hamlet, it's either industrial, residential, commercial, it's broken down that way. So we need to have more discussion about whether we want to see it as rezoned to rural industrial with provisions to allow dwelling, or leave it as is as a residential zoned property to allow the industry on the lands. I'm not sure at this point if it matters. I think I like the idea of just keeping the site specific on it to allow the residential, that it's zoned residential, and then the industry is still permitted because it's already allowed now. The other issue with this property is that they're proposing a horse shed. The application indicates that the occupants of the property are a horse and buggy family. Their primary mode of transportation is horse and buggy. We've dealt with these types of requests in the past when we have a horse and buggy shed in an area that isn't permitted one. And this is, again, because it's a hamlet, livestock facilities are not allowed. MDS is not applicable because livestock facilities simply aren't allowed. So we have in the past permitted them when it is for their primary mode of transportation. We've seen zone amendments or minor variances in Glen Allen, in Wallenstein, in I believe Yachton. And then we've also permitted them on smaller parcels in the prime ag as well to accommodate this, this community. Usually though, we've allowed them to be of a size that would accommodate a couple horses and a couple buggies. And it's usually around the 1,000 square foot size. So they're asking for one that's, twice that size. So I have asked that there's some justification provided as to why it needs to be that big. It is a single family residence that's being proposed on the property, so I'm not entirely sure how many horse and buggy space they need. And then the last issue that I needed clarification on with this one is there are a number of accessory structures on the property as well. In the purple, you can see those are new ones. Or they're repairing them, and then there's one big existing one. So I need to understand what those buildings are going to be used for. Are they part of the industry? If they are, then we need to include that in the square footage for the industry building. If they're going to remain as accessory to the residence, then we need to establish that as well and make sure that they meet the accessory structure criteria. So there's still some outstanding issues that need to be further investigated before we can move forward with this application. But having said that, you know, they can't, an amending bylaw cannot be approved until such time that the lot line adjustment is complete anyways, because they need that other land in order to include that in their application. So we wouldn't be in a position to approve it at this point in time anyways. The last thing I need clarification on is what is the industry going to be on that property? What is proposed? At this point in time, there's just, the application just indicates a dry industrial use. And because we're in a hamlet and there are residential properties very close by, we need to understand exactly what type of industry is going to go in there.
Okay, lots of questions from the planner on this one. Does the applicant, Mr. Boozman, like to speak, please?
Mayor, Council, and been presented well, and this has been an interesting application for me to better understand the Mennonite culture a little bit and the situation we have here in Wallenstein. So as indicated, all the purple structures are either new or being fixed up. There's one on the right, and Simeon Bowman, there's a yellow box and a little touch of purple. That's not going to happen any longer. Mr. Bowman's main force is he needs the horse barn. He needs the horse barn for his, and that's the purple on the right up high, and he needs that facility. And so he knows he needs his own change. So he hasn't made the career change yet, but he wants to make the career change of having his own building on the property for his own business. So I've been hounding Mr. Bowman very politely to say, what are you making? What are you going to make? Because I know it's important to planning staff and it's important to this application. And he says, well, I'm not really quite sure, but he's trying to give me descriptions, and I'm trying to present to you the descriptions, and maybe he can highlight on that more in a few minutes. One of the things is to have sheet metal, and he cuts it with a laser machine. It comes in large sheets. He said 5 by 10 feet, and he'll be cutting them into 2 to 100 pieces. My first question was, how do you cut them? Is it noisy? No, it's not noisy. Okay, it's not noisy. That's what I want to know. Also, he'd be involved in brake forming. Now, when I was in high school, I used a brake, so I know what a brake is, but I know that they can be manual or powered. And he said they're going to be power driven up to 10 feet in length. A brake is a device that takes a piece of steel or aluminum, you put in the aluminum, whatever, and then you bend it. So imagine you need a power driven one if it's a steel that you're putting in there. He again says it's relatively quiet. I said, will you be drilling holes? He said, yeah, maybe I'll drill a few holes. He assured me there would not be any woodworking. But this metal fabricating and what he's going to actually make, he didn't quite know. But he gave me an example of someone who builds racks, some firm in Elmira where he works right now that they take care of. I asked if there would be any painting. The answer was no. Would you be doing anything with chemicals that could contaminate the soil? And the answer again was no. I said, what about your garbage? What about your waste? What are you going to do? And so we have an idea of where we want some outdoor storage. We expect a few bins for outdoor storage. All the aluminum and steel scrap will be recycled. So again, no expectations of woodworking. I said, will you be using pallets to have the product delivered and the product delivered out? He said, yes, we'll be having pallets. Usually though, the product that they're gonna have done will stay in the shop and will be taken out on delivery. So that's the description that I have of and I asked about how big. He said it's gonna be one level, the main shop with a 20-foot ceiling. That's the expectation. Also, when the raw product comes in, it will go directly into the building. The delivery will be typically on straight trucks or flatbeds. So I said, well, I'm familiar with a greenhouse and I see all the shrink wrap they use and all the cardboard. What about that? Yeah, I'll probably have some shrink wrap, probably very little cardboard. And as I said, we talked about the garbage bins being in the outdoor storage. So that's a bit of a description of the facility that's planned in the large purple one that's parallel to the trail. The small purple one beside that, they call it a power room, providing power to the facility. I asked about the horse barn, and that is the one on the right, the rectangular one. And that was the one about 270 square meters, I think it is. I can look it up in a minute. And the question was, well, we usually expect about 1,000 square feet, which in metric is about 100 square meters. So I asked, why do you need it so big? Well, I plan to have up to 4 horses, but we need room for 20 horses. I said, 20 horses, why? Well, when guests come on Sunday, we expect to take in the horses and water them and take care of them, and they need to be inside. So, oh, okay, like I don't know that. So I'm thankful for the insight and the knowledge of the expectations. And then we did as we went through just using a Google Earth type thing. I use a GRCA website to kind of say, well, the barns in the area, what size are they? And so we went through a number of barns, and I can give you hand out a few pieces of paper. We kind of just identified a few, and it's really quick. It's a very simplistic drawing. So our subject property is in the blue. And then we looked at the farm, the barn, the property across the road. That barn is 290 square meters. The one to the south, that one's bigger, and that one has an older bank barn and has cows in it as well. So that's really not a great comparable. The one on the other side of the tracks, so that shows 380 square meters. Then you go further north on the left, you got 170 square meters and 380. And I think that was, and the second page is more of a zoom in of the barns. We're proposing 221 square meters for that new purple one there. And then on the property in the front, there's a yellow rectangular building now that's used for the horses, and that's 177. So we didn't find in his neighborhood, and he wasn't familiar with barns that were 1,000 square feet. Doesn't mean that, I'm sure they exist and people have them, but that's the reason behind having a barn that can hold 20 horses, so you can have the guests. There were some questions about the sheds. On the right, one is really a shop. The long narrow one, the one on the right is for their existing buggies. The small purple one on the lower left, that's an existing foundation. And Mr. Bowman said, my wife wants a nice shed for the lawn equipment. And that's what's going to go in that one. All the buildings are 1 story, and I could go into the plans for heights of the ceilings and so on. Now, the barn will have a 2nd floor because I guess typically they all put hay in the 2nd floor. So that's what they typically do. I found this one very interesting because I found the beautiful culture of Mennonite world, if you will, to have a mix of they live at home, work at home, and travel simply. They have a residence in a, say, urban village area, and they have a business, and they need a horse and buggy. Our typical zoning bylaws don't think that, are not in that realm. We put residential here, we put office here, we put agriculture here, we put industry here. Their worlds are putting it all together and sometimes on the same property. And when I looked at the zoning around, and that's on the 1 page of the report I gave you, it just struck me, almost every single property has a special designation to somehow accommodate it. Accommodate this unique culture, and how are we going to mix that industry, the working at home, having a horse barn, and being in the village all in one shot. So as Linda suggested, not quite sure exactly how to frame this zoning. At the end of the day, you know, our goal is to accomplish the tasks to allow Mr. Bowman to have these two properties, because the zoning, I should be clear, affects two properties, the big one on the right and the small one on the left. The reason we're doing the small one on the left as well is because of this lot line adjustment. Maybe I should, if I could here, this lot line adjustment is bringing, right now, the property line is here. And because of the desire to take the driveway off the trail, we're gonna put the driveway like this. And we actually got truck modeling, driving modeling to see that we could get a truck out perpendicular to the road. The problem is this property then shrinks a bit so that it's no longer 0.4 of a hectare to meet that zoning requirements. So because it's slightly smaller, we thought, well, let's wrap it all up in the same zone change process. That's the main reason why that one is there. But also, I guess at the same time to address, we got a building that's been used as horse and buggy building for many years as well. I think I've addressed it all. I think I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments from those in attendance? Please indicate so and state your name and address for the record. First, hear from those in support of the zoning application. Anybody here wishing to speak opposed to it? Okay, any questions from members of council then to this application? Councilor Douglas.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, just a quick question. Do you know the frequency or quantity of transport trucks and what size of transport trucks you'd expect?
Business wasn't nailed down, not well. I believe in the initial presentation, we expect a few trucks a day each way, like bringing in raw material or sending out a delivery.
Go ahead, Councilor Douglas.
There we go. But in terms of size, I'm just concerned about, so the truck turning shows more of a straight truck. If they get into more of a semi, making that little curve at the end, the entry, just if bigger trucks do frequent the site, it might be a little difficult to make that work in the space allowed.
I've made that same comment and to say, we can make this work with a good sized straight truck with a full length tractor trailer. It's going to be a challenge.
Other questions from members of council? Councilor Craven?
It's more a comment than a question. It's a pretty small piece of land, quite a few buildings on it, pretty busy. I'm a little bit concerned. If you get a fire in there, you're gonna lose everything because they're all so close together that you're just not gonna be able to control it if there's a fire. And that's my concern, that because it's a small piece of land with so many buildings on it, I'm just a little bit concerned about that part.
I really don't know how to address that offhand.
Any other questions, Councilor? Yeah, Mike? Martin, yes.
For the most part, I don't, through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have an issue with, you know, the barns and stuff. We've done this before, like Linda indicated, all across the township, right? So makes a lot of sense. It is a little busy. There's lots of busy spots around. The part that I don't understand is why, like, to figure out what the type of business it'll be, to make this type of investment on a property. You got to know what you're making, what you're shipping, what you're bringing in. Like, I don't think that's a lot to ask to have a little bit maybe better idea, other than like bending sheet metal. I get it, but like, I don't think it's too much to ask to have maybe a little more nailed down description of what the business will be. But outside of that, I think it addresses a lot of issues, gets the driveway off the trail. There's a lot of good things going on in this multifaceted or multi-application. But other than that, it's just, I think the business type is something I would want to know more.
Thank you. And I think that's Mr. Guzman would like to know more about that as well. That's something they have to nail down. What's council's thoughts on the size of the horse and buggy barn? Because it's, you know, bylaws, 1,000 square feet. This is like 2,300. Any comments on that, Councilor Craven?
Well, not really. I guess it's just seems awful big. So if you have your gathering on the weekend where you've got 15 or 20 horses there, is it going to sit empty the rest of the time, all week long, or what?
Yeah, it's basically just on weekends, yeah, we get company or accommodate guests, horses.
So currently you have the horse and buggy barn there now. There's one there. And that size is, sorry, I can't remember what the size is of what's currently there. How many horses does it hold currently?
You go ahead.
Well, currently, there's no horse barn on the property. Currently.
On the back one, there's no one, on the back one, there isn't. There's one for his buggies. On the front one, there is a horse and buggy building, yes.
Do we know what the size of that one is on the front one?
The front one's about 177 square meters. That's about 1,900 square feet.
And holds how many horses in that one? In the front one?
Lot can hold up to 20 horses as well.
Okay, thank you. So we don't know the industry. We got an answer on the horse and buggy. And the other accessory structures that are there, are they going to be part of the home industry?
No. So this will be the new horse barn. This is the shop. This is a power room. This is, Simeon has told me we're not doing this any longer. This is the rebuilding of the barn foundations for garden equipment. And Mr. Mullin said, I said, pretty big for that. He said, yeah, but actually, I would just want to use that footprint that's there, that concrete that's there to build this structure.
Further questions then, comments from council members? Okay. Public meeting is now concluded. Thank you for attending the public meeting. Moved by Councilor Otten, second by Councilor Douglas, that the planning report regarding ZBA 2022-09, part lot 19, concession 1, part lots 1 and 2, RP 60R2449, municipally known as 6385 Yatton Side Road, be received for information. Any further comments and questions then? All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Councilor Craven, thank you. That's carried. Moving on to item 6.5. This is a public meeting under the Planning Act to hear comments from the public and agencies and to give consideration to an application ZBA 2022-12 for proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Subject lands are located at part lot 19, concession 16381 Yatton Side Road. Purpose and effect is to remove the manufacturing use provisions, permit a small barn, and recognize a reduced lot area and setbacks. Mr. Clerk, we'll hear your statutory requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff can confirm proper postings and agencies were circulated on September 20th. County of Wellington planners have submitted a report. It's in the agenda. There were no comments received from ratepayers.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to the planner, Linda.
Thank you, Mayor. So this as well is part of the lot line adjustment application that you'll be reviewing later in the meeting. The reason they need zoning relief is because as part of that lot line adjustment, they're reducing their lot area. So they're not in compliance. They are in compliance now. They meet the minimum size, but this lot line adjustment will create the deficiency. Generally, we don't like to see that, but in this case, we appreciate the fact that the driveway is going to be rectified on the adjacent land. So we think this is a good idea to do this. So we support the reduction in the area to allow it. It's a very small reduction. The only outstanding question I had, which we've already discussed, is the size of the horse shed that they're proposing on the site. When I did do a site visit, the building is there. It's a barn now. So I was just curious to have more details on how it's to be used and how many livestock they're proposing to utilize in that barn.
Thank you, Linda. And we'll now hear from Mr. Boozman.
I apologize, I kind of overlapped the two a bit. So I think we've talked about it all. Again, the barn, as Linda just mentioned, the barn exists and it's used for the horses. And as Mr. Bowman pointed out, it has the capacity for 20 horses for the Sundays when many people come over. I think it's good to tidy it all up, as well as that one comment to take away the one industrial use it technically has right now. So happy to answer you for the questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments in those in attendance? Please indicate so and state your name and address for the record. First, we'll hear from those in support of the application. Anybody here wish to speak against the application? Questions, comments from council? Okay, this public meeting is now concluded. Thank you for attending the public meeting. The resolution here moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Ottens. That planning report regarding ZBA 2022-12, part lot 19, concession 1, part 3, RP 602449, municipally known as 6381 Yatton Side Road, be received for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, it's carried. Yeah, we'll move on to the next one. Item 6.6. Which is a consent. We have here moved by Councillor Otten, second by Councillor Douglas, that the Council of the Township of Mapleton support consent application B 129/22 as presented for lands described as part lot 19, concession 1, RP 60R2449, part 3, with the following conditions: that the owner satisfy all the requirements of the local municipality, financial and otherwise, for the proper and orderly development of the subject lands, including but not limited to outstanding taxes. That payment be made of the fee of $332 for a letter of clearance, that a copy of the deposit reference plan be submitted to the township, that zoning relief is obtained for the retained lands related to the lot area, that a new driveway access to 6384 Yatton Side Road can be obtained, and the current driveway is removed to the satisfaction of the township. And further, that council authorizes the planning and development manager to file with the secretary treasurer of the planning and land division committee at the county of Wellington a letter of clearance of these conditions on completion of the same. Whew. Okay. Questions, comments on this from council? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. Moving on to the next one, item 6.7. This one's 2 pages. And this one's moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Ottens, that the Council of the Township of Mapleton support consent application B 130/22 as presented for lands described as part lot 6, concession 2, with a municipal address of 8508, concession 3, with the following conditions: that the owner satisfy all the requirements of the local municipality, financial and otherwise, for the proper and orderly development of the subject lands, including but not limited to the outstanding taxes, that a parkland dedication fee be paid as provided for in the Planning Act, RSO 1990, that payment be made of the fee of $332 for a letter of clearance, that a copy of the deposit reference plan be submitted to the township, that servicing can be accommodated on the severed and retained lands to satisfy the Township of Mapleton, that a copy of the deposited reference plan be submitted to the township. And further, that council authorizes the planning and development manager to file with the secretary treasurer of the planning and land division committee at the county of Wellington a letter of clearance of these conditions on completion of the same. Questions, comments from council? All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to 6.8. Moved by Counselor Otten, second by Counselor Douglas, that the Council of Township of Mapleton not support consent application B 131/22 as presented for lands described as part lot 13, concession 11 with a municipal address of 7219 Side Road 18. And that should the Land Division Committee approve consent application B 131/22, we would recommend the following conditions. That the owner satisfy all the requirements of the local municipality, financial and otherwise, for the proper and orderly development of the subject lands, including but not limited to outstanding taxes. That a park land dedication fee be paid as provided for in the Planning Act. That the applicant provides a municipal drain reapportionment of municipal agreement or a mutual agreement, as determined by the drainage superintendent as per the applicable the township fees and charges bylaw. That payment be made of a fee of $332 for a letter of clearance, that a copy of the deposit reference plan be submitted to the township. That minimum distance separation can be met to the severed parcel, and further that council authorizes the planning and development manager to file with the secretary treasurer of the Planning and Land Division Committee at the County of Wellington a letter of clearance of these conditions on completion of the same. Questions, comments? All in favor? Oh, sorry, wait a minute. Councilor Martin, jumping in.
You're going fast. You're on a roll.
I just caught you sleeping, that's
Yeah,
all.
it's true. This one, I don't know what to make of it because I appreciate the recommendations from the planner that it's not surplus to a farm consolidation. But being that I'm good at playing devil's advocate, what are the other options for, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Linda? What are the other options? Because if, say, the cash cropper next door buys the farm, he can sever it off and sell it with no trouble. The Weebers are looking to allegedly retire and move to that particular parcel. There's really no mechanism, and that's just is there a mechanism to ever sever off that piece of property so that they can sell the farm, or do they sell the farm and the new owner gets to do the severance because they'd be allowed?
I'll go to Planner Redmond.
So there's a few questions there. Okay. So first scenario you gave is if they sold it to the adjacent farmer, he would be allowed to do it. Well, if they sold it to the adjacent farmer, they could do a lot line adjustment and retain one of the dwellings. They can pick and choose which one. They could retain the farm dwelling, that's part of the farm cluster, or they could retain this parcel that they're proposing to sever now. So that's available to anybody now anyways, right? The problem with this one is that it's there as a result of a permitted use that is permitted now, which is the right to build a second dwelling on a farm for farm help or for family. That can happen right now. And the concern is that if people start coming forward to sever off these dwellings that are permitted as of right, we could be setting a precedent. So we have to maintain the policy which says a new lot on prime ag land, a new residential lot, whether there's a house on it or not, is not permitted, except for certain circumstances, which is what we just talked about, a consolidation, lot line adjustment, what have you. If a farmer bought it that had farm parcels elsewhere and they were consolidating their farms and they wanted to sever off their surplus dwelling, again, would only be permitted to sever off the one, not both. So in any scenario, there would only be one opportunity to do that.
Clear as mud. Thank you, Linda. It is a difficult situation now that we're allowing secondary dwellings being built on properties, whether it be in town or out with the new bylaws. Potentially it could, you could have someone build they have a big property here in Moorfield, for example, and they put a secondary house on there. Can they separate it later on? right? That's kind of a difficult situation, right? So I see where the province is wanting to do all this extra adding on, but it can also lead to situations like this where you want to separate it all. So good question. Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, maybe it was built for the help, but you know, I suspect like most of these secondary dwellings, they were always designed to be a dotty house anyway, right? Or a garden suite or whatever we officially call them now.
Dotty house.
Yeah. House for your grandparents.
Okay.
Right? So, it's, you know, I guess the other way to look at it is if it would be allowed to sever off, the current property owner could sell it on their own too, right? Like that could always be but do we know if the applicants, like if they're selling the farm, like, is it staying in the family, like just getting passed down? Like, is this more of a formality or is it an actual, like the farm is being sold out of the family and they just want a spot to live here and not have to move into Drayton to the apartments or something so they can stay in the country?
Sorry, Linda? Sorry.
I don't know.
May I address the chair?
Not normally, sir. Thank you. So we don't know that answer. But I hear what you're saying. However, it could be the same if you had that secondary property on your house, where you are. You built something, your dotty house, as you call it. Never heard that before, but good term. And then later on wanted to have a second driveway or separate that. I don't know. It's kind of a interesting thought pattern. Councilor Ottens.
Thank you. Through you. Typically, though, those secondary homes on an existing property share a driveway, right? That's how they, like, if we wanted to build a granny suite or something, or rental property on our property in town, they share the same driveway. In this case, they already have a separate driveway. And I guess I look at this one as a little bit different. I'm not sure how we can, if we can add, I know within Committee of Adjustment, we always say none of these decisions are precedent setting. We make each decision on its own. It was how it was sold in that committee. So I don't know if we can do that here as well, because it's located within a hamlet as far as the MDS. I mean, there's already all these other houses there. The house they want to sever off is not just the corner of the farm randomly in the middle of the country. It's part of Goldstone, right? So, I mean, it's beside and across from already a lot of existing lots and houses. So it seems odd that this one with its own driveway right across the road from the other neighbors can't be severed within the confines of these rules. So I don't know, is it possible to make a decision that just applies to this, but is not precedent setting and add that in?
I think it would be precedent setting no matter what you do, right? Because it's, once you open that can of worms, then you will have people come forward and say, well, you did it over here, why can't you do it for me? And that's something we struggle with all the time at Land Division as well, is trying not to set a precedent that is going to come back and cause us other issues later on. Something we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Further thoughts, questions? I'm pausing, Mr. Martin, because you told me I go too fast, so go
No,
ahead.
so what's the option then for this property owner? There would be just no options. So you talk about a lot line adjustment, but in this case, probably doesn't meet their needs, right? Because there's no, like, it's not another property that they'd be looking to. So the short-term or even long-term solution for this particular property is that it will always have two residents attached to it.
And I'll turn that over to you, but further to that, when this was allowed way back when, would they have been told then? I don't know what the rules were when this house came in. Were they told then that this would always be part of the property? Also interesting to know. Go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know what the zoning bylaw was at the time that it was constructed. The current zoning bylaw does require that the second house is constructed within the farm cluster. So there's criteria, there's a 200-foot radius that has to utilize the same driveway. It has to be in that cluster. So the provisions are in place now to ensure that the dwelling isn't constructed up, in the back 40 somewhere. We see these, they're around. This isn't the first one that's been applied for. It might be the first one in Mapleton, but I have seen them elsewhere in the county where they've come forward to apply for these. The policies are the policies. My job is to tell you what they are and tell you if it meets it. Land division makes the ultimate decision. So there's no other option for these people other than, if maybe the next door neighbor purchased the farm and it merged and they could retain this dwelling separate.
Thank you. Further comments and questions? All right, so we have here that the council, the township of Mapleton, not support this consent application, just so reminding people that's what you'll be voting on, not supporting this as it is written. So everyone clear that we're voting on not supporting this? If you vote yay, it's not supporting it. Any questions on that? All right. All those in favor of the resolution as it is written? Those opposed? It is carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7.1. Ron Nillemans. Ron? If you want to come and take the podium there and hit the red button or hit the button to make it red and.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor, Greg, and councillors. Thanks for listening to my concerns. I've always lived in Mapleton Township, previously Maryborough Township. Our side road has been paved for 60 years. When I was a kid, 7 years old, I remember because we could ride a bicycle on it, right? So I went to a Lions Club meeting in Atwood about 40 years ago, and their guest speaker was a Reeve for Elma Township. He was complimenting Maryborough Township for all the roads which have been paved and suggested that Elma Township had a lot of catching up to do. Once it is paved, no more grading or calcium, etc. So to me, we're going backwards because our roads all turned into gravel. So under this council's term, Side Road 6 was neglected and turned into gravel. And then I've been talking back and forth with Greg. We were asked to be patient because in the budget for 2022, Side Road 6 was going to be paved. We're going to get it done, right? So finally, we've been waiting probably over 5 years between the road being all a mess. And then finally, put up with all the dust for the gravel road. We're right north of the road. So we get all the dust, the west prevailing winds. We have, like tonight too, I got to go wash off the back of the car because it's full of dust. Now it's not as bad right now because you close the road. So we don't get as much dust. So maybe that's the option, is to close the road, but with the bridge being put up, But anyways, so then, 2022, we wait for that. And now you guys moved the money from our Side Road 6 to concession 2. And there's no timeline of getting the money back. So you had a 10-year plan how to do all this stuff. And then you just throw it out the window. It's very, very frustrating as a ratepayer, and we got to live there. So we're kind of at the point, if it doesn't get any better, we have to move because we can't live like that. We have a sunroom out back, it's full of dust, okay? So summertime, we had always have the air conditioning on because we can't have the windows open. There's so much dust coming in. They water the road down and like a day later, like the sun's beat it down, and I don't know if it's because it's a new gravel road or what, but the main concern is it was supposed to be paved. Everybody else, like all of a sudden it's done, right? But no, we're supposed to wait like 5 years and now it's still not getting done. You know, we waited, and I don't know what else to say. It's, and you know what? I see what happens here tonight. Like, yeah, we have a nay or a yay, and like, you know, guys are half asleep and say, yeah, whatever, that's good. Let's move that money over to the other budget. And it gets done very quickly. So I'm hoping maybe that was a mistake that night when that got done. If not, we've really been neglected. So that's my point. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Just remain there just in case there's any questions from members of council on it. Any questions from council members? Go to Council Martin.
Yeah, for the record, I wasn't sleeping. I was just slow. I'm trying to think about the exact details about how this got moved out of the budget. We did do a traffic count, like a traffic study last year, right? Or was it that happened this year? Do we have a rationale? I know Sam's not here, but do we have a rationale on the gravel versus being paved?
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Manny in just a second, but when we've had many conversations, the delegates and I, there is a history of this. When it was turned into gravel, the residents were all notified that it's going to be turned into gravel, and they were notified that it would be paved. And that was put into the budgeting process. And in 2021, it was there to be done in 2022. When we did the 2022 budget, Mr. Matina had to rejig things because of the cost of projects. And one of the things, and another project that was really needing to be done, and that needed to be funded. So Mr. Matina took out of the budget this road to be paved. I believe there's 5 homes on it, 5 or 6, 5 homes. There's 5 homes on it. It used to be a county road at one time. That's why it was paved. And so Mr. Matina took it out of the budget. I had a conversation with him. He said, look, I need to take it out of the budget because we have to do this other project. And as we know, with our infrastructure deficit that we have in our township, there are a lot of roads that are needing a repair, and a lot of roads like this road that we're talking about here that are in desperate need of pavement or back in the gravel. And this is one of the, with a $10 million shortage per year. I think that's you're talking about as a finance director, infrastructure, $10 million a year deficit. We have to start making these hard decisions. And Mr. Matina made the hard decision that we can't do this. So when we did the budgeting in earlier or late last year, this year, when we actually passed it, that was taken out and council passed the budget as was. So council may not have been completely aware that a road has been taken in and out, but that is what has happened. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Worship. And as we will be faced here in a few short weeks with doing the 2023 budget, we're going to be faced with fairly hefty inflationary pressures. Construction index alone has gone up 24% year over year. So the budget, as we've explained it, and John's a proponent of this, is almost a living, breathing document. And we have to adapt fairly quickly sometimes as to what project we do, which one we take out, with the goal of making sure that Mapleton as a whole is well taken care of. So prior to this meeting, we spoke to the manager of Public Works, and for that project to bring it back to pavement would be $490,000, which doesn't include the shoulder work. So like everything, staff present what we feel is the best option. when it relates to all ratepayers within Mapleton and the best use of the limited dollars that we do have. And it remains out of the budget. And if council wishes, we can look at ways to put it back in. However, at this time, there is clear, and it's by no means personal, it's just, it's factual. That amount of money for 5 homes versus that amount of money for several homes, you know, it's sometimes, it's a difficult decision to make, but it's one that, you know, we recommend and not put in a budget.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Other comments or questions from council? Councillor Ottens?
Thank you. Are there other options like tar and chip, or is that not considered a viable option anymore? Is it too short term?
Yeah, and Jim and I talked about that a little bit, and you know, whatever we decide to do, the operating costs will be a little bit, you know, they'll be there, but not as much as paving it. So whether we use calcium or tar and chip might have a little bit more life, but doesn't address the fact that it's gonna be a little bit more dusty and not as robust as we're used to.
Other questions, comments? Councillor Craven?
We've always had a policy in Mapleton, Maryborough, and Peel before that, that when a road was paved, if any construction on it had happened, then it was repaved eventually, shortly. And I don't see any reason to have to change that policy, except for cost. And I won't be here to help with the next budget, but I would really like to see this road be paved again, because it was paved. Those people put their houses there thinking they were gonna live on a paved road. Now all of a sudden they live in a dustbin. So I would like to see it be on the budget for next year at any rate.
Thank you, Councillor Craven. Anybody else? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This kind of conversation took me back to the side road 20. Multiple conversations we had, 5-6 years ago, maybe, about the same thing, right? So it's, you know, a change in the level of service, and there was enough of a public push in Elma for that road to be paved or to stay paved or whatever. That, I mean, there's a few more houses on there in that cluster, obviously on side road 20, but I don't disagree with Councillor Craven, you know, about, you know, there's expectations attached to a particular level of service. That being said, I think we haven't even started having those tough conversations yet about, you know, cost versus level of service and how that impacts the overall residents. But I'd love to see options, I guess, like just to see what a tar and chip, I mean, that would be, it would help address a dust situation. Certainly not as nice as asphalt, but growing up in Gray County, like that was the majority of our roads were tar and chip, right? And it worked. So maybe that could be something, you know, depending on options, right? I think, you know, your points, Manny, were well taken about, you know, like if you were trying to justify it in, you know, with traffic counts or a traffic study, you're probably not going to get the volume. Well, I'm sure the residents don't want the volume of traffic there either to justify asphalt, but I do think there is something to what Councillor Craven indicated about, you know, kind of restoring a similar level of service after construction. So I'd love to at least, you know, see what some options could be.
Thank you, sir.
Like you say, 5 houses, but the village of Lebanon's there, like there's about 15 houses in Lebanon. They all come out and use that road, and they can't use it. And same account was put down, but you put the count down when it's a gravel dusty road. Well, nobody drives on it because who wants a dirty car, right? So if it was paved, the count would go way up. And you also have the road from Milverton, like 131, like those people come straight through and use that road, but now they don't, they got to go around. So that's my comment. So
Thank you. Further comments from council members? Councilor Craven?
That's one thing we have made a mistake in the past with their infrastructure, is to ignore it and put it off. I think that's a big mistake, to put it off to another year and another year and another year, because then it never gets done. So I would really like to see it go in the budget for next year.
Thank you, Councilor Craven. I have a resolution here moved by Councilor Douglas, second by Councilor Ottens, that the Township of Mapleton Council receive for information the delegation of Ron Needleman's Needleman's, thank you, of 6447 Side Road 6 in Mapleton. Any further questions, comments on this? All in favor of receiving it? Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
You too. Now we'll go to the next delegation. We have Jeff. Jeff's not here. Okay. Jeff left. So we won't have our 7.2 then. Moving on to item. We got nothing on minutes from committees. And we'll go to 9.1 reports from staff. We get the building department report. And I have here a resolution moved by Councilor Martin, second by Councilor Craven, that Township of Mapleton Council received for information building department report BD 2022-12 dated October 11th, 2022, regarding September month end and year to date. So that report is there in front of you. Do we have any questions or comments on that report? Councilor Douglas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank you for adding 2019 on there like I asked for. So all good.
Well, look at that. Your second to third last meeting and now you get what you want finally. Don't say we didn't give you anything as a parting gift. Anything else? All those in favor of receiving this? Thank you. Item 9.21, moved by Councilor Craven, second by Councilor Martin. That the Township of Mapleton Council received for information report CL 2022-17 dated October 11th, 2022 regarding Township of Mapleton staff retention and attraction strategy, and that Township of Mapleton Council endorsed this report and direct staff to introduce said report to newly elected council at their November 22nd meeting for approval. Turn this over to Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Worship. So I don't think it's a secret that Mapleton, where we're located geographically, is in lately intense conversation for staffing. There's something that's going on in the last year or so that every business from coffee shops to restaurants to big industries to municipalities are all seem to be fighting for the same position. And we're not immune to that. We obviously what we've gone through with the building department, we can't seem to attract building officials. But it goes further than that. There's we can't afford to lose any more staff. So senior management got together and tried to brainstorm on different ways that we can not only attract staff, but we do have amazing staff, and we want to make sure that we keep them as well and keep them happy, because when we do hire, we hire the right people, and it's a shame to see them move on to bigger centers. But we've been faced with positions that are similar in nature in surrounding municipalities, are paying anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 more for the same position, in actually same or lesser position. A perfect example is perhaps for various reasons, our Director of Public Works, more money, in different reasons, of course. But so we're faced with challenges, and it's something that I think we're going to continue to face. And so staff came up with some ideas on how we can help attract and retain, more importantly, retain the great staff that we have. And this is just a report, and I understand that we are in lame duck, but I felt it's important to share with the council that we've dealt with for at least 4 years here, and how we can move forward, and just some of the ideas that we're faced with. And it'd be nice not to be able to compete or to have to compete with centers like Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo. Center Wellington, but we are competing with them, and we're just doing what we can to keep our staff happy and be able to attract.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Barron. So we'll open it up for council for discussion then. Councilor Craven.
That's a very good report. It's a good suggestion. And obviously that it's not gonna work to throw more money at them. There are some other suggestions that are made too that are very viable. And going down the road, I hope you really go by what is in that report to a certain degree.
Thank you, Councilor Craven. Other thoughts, comments? Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report. I think they're all things, you know, that we look at some point. And I hate to do like, with all due respect though, but with all due respect, everybody's got these challenges, right? From the region of Waterloo has this exact, you know, issue with recruitment at the moment. I think it's probably oversimplistic to say that people left because of money, right? There's lots of different reasons that why we have vacancies. And I think that if every municipality, and again, there's nothing wrong with, you know, more competitive pay bands, better, you know, vacation entitlements, personal days, working from home opportunities, all that stuff that can make for a workplace where, you know, people have more tangible benefits, but we're also looking at a CPI of a minimum of 7% coming up. I think all these things need to be spoken about in a context that incorporates all of that stuff. And I guess I would prefer to, instead of pigeonholing the next council, it could be you and 4 new faces. Like I would prefer that this report gets addressed kind of in that context and in kind of a budgetary, because there probably would need to be some give and take, I would imagine. A bit of a two-way street. If you're looking like for increased benefits and vacation entitlements and all that stuff are all things that we should certainly look at. But to like approve this report and push it forward as a, you know, a motion for the next council to have to kind of deal with at their first meeting, I would prefer myself to defer it and let that council look at it and maybe look at it in a context of a budgeting type of context, if that makes any sense.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I guess I'm also that type of person that doesn't like to use that word, but we're very diligent in doing our exit interviews with the staff that do leave. And 70, so the last few that left out of the 3, 2 were nothing but except for money. So I want to make sure that that's fair, because if it was anything else, when we do our exit interview, we would absolutely take into consideration. But the last 2 out of 3 were absolutely and only because of money and nothing else.
Councilor Douglas.
Yes, I'm kind of disagree with Councillor Martin. I think it's important to get this moving now because it just sits and waits for another 6 weeks. I don't think there's any harm in moving forward with the report and letting the next council choose what to do with it, but at least they have the recommendations in a more timely fashion.
Thank you. Further comments and questions? You know, Mr. Bear and I have had many discussions about retention and discussed the many options that were, you know, some of them here, some of them aren't here. But it's certainly something that it's, as you pointed out, Councillor Martin, it's not just locally, it's everywhere. And I know that Mr. Barron has been in discussions with Wellington North and Minto and Center Wellington, you know, looking at it because they're all looking at the same thing. You know, what do we do? And is there an opportunity for us to work collectively as municipalities as well, which is not you know, talked about here, but it's certainly something we should also discuss, because if, you know, if Minto raises their rates and then Wellington North beats them and then Center Wellington beats them, and then of course everyone's trying to beat each other, and that's not good either for any of us. So that's something also that Mr. Barron is in discussions with. So that's something to keep in mind. These are things we all have to think about, and I'm not, you know what, they're tough. They're tough. You know, we look at moving from the 50th to the 60th percentile. That's going to cost. And is that what we need to do? If we're looking at staff time off between Christmas and New Year's, well, that's an extra time vacation, and then they're getting paid vacation and not here, and increased number of vacation entitlements or personal days, or you know, even the probationary period, which I don't like. I don't like cutting the probationary period from 6 months, 3 to 3 months. I think we need 6 months. But you know, things you got to look at, and I know the county itself are doing the same thing. Is the report after report when the human resources is that we have to be competitive, and this is what we have to be in this market. Because if my conversation with the premier last week, and we were looking at building inspectors, there's a shortage right across the province. Even the province's building inspectors are being, you know, taken from them and going to the cities, which are offering more money than the province is offering. So now what's the province got to do? Raise up. So, you know, the premier and I had that discussion last week because we're short building inspectors and we're having a tough time. But certainly something that all of us at this table and the next council will certainly have to discuss even further of what are we not just capable of, but you know, what tax wise, but comfortable with doing, because it's certainly a very difficult decision, because we know that as soon as we make some of these decisions, it goes in the newspaper and then people are all over us for raising the rates and to cover off our expensive staff, as we hear sometimes, which is far from the truth when you look at some other municipalities. We do have great staff and we do want to retain them. So, and we certainly want to retain and get more great staff to complement what we already have. And that's something that's very difficult and we have to talk about. Further added?
Thank you, Worship. And the one thing that we are very clear about and realize is it's something that we cannot spend our way out of. There is no way we can allocate that kind of money that other municipalities do. So realizing that, it's, you know, I commend staff and specifically Ali, because, you know, she worked really hard on getting some of this information, but spending will not get us out of this. So really staff came together and tried to come up with creative ways, I guess, rather than financial ways. So I just wanted to say that they do care.
From experiences that council have, do they have anything they'd like to add to this for further discussion? You know, with your experiences, you know, all of us have had previous experiences. I know in running the business, the retaining was very difficult, especially when you don't have the dollars, because that sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes retaining staff for me was to give them that extra vacation or to incentivize them some other ways besides, you know, the wage. And that's what we have to look at. Any further comments, questions? Councilor Douglas, you look like you're wanting to say something.
I was just gonna say, I don't mind sharing, but I don't want to do it in this forum per se, but you know, I'd enjoy having a discussion offline.
And we'll have an offline discussion then. So, but if you, okay, council, put it this way, if you have any thoughts and ideas, Mr. Barron will be all and happy to accept those as we continue to look for ways to retain and to attain new staff members. All right, that being said, I've already read this. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now we moved on to the next council. Next, we have moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Craven, that the CAO report CL 2022-18 dated October 11th, 2022 regarding Glenavalid Phase 2, Stage 3 preliminary acceptance to be received for information. And further, that Township Mapleton Council hereby approve preliminary acceptance for the Glenavalid Phase 2, Stage 3, subject to the following conditions. Verification of all administrative matters, including the payment of any outstanding charges and invoices by Glenavalid Development Corporation and replenishment of the $20,000 deposit as required. The township grant preliminary acceptance of the works in Glenavalid Phase 2, Stage 3, and thereby commencing the maintenance period as of May 31st, 2022. All right. Any questions, comments on this? All in favor? That's carried. Next, we have finance report. Moved by Councillor Craven, second by Councillor Martin, the finance report FIN 2022-17 dated October 11th, 2022. Reporting the energy consumption for 2021 be received for as information. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Craven?
Now, most of these percentages, so on electricity use are pretty false because of COVID. We're affected so much by COVID that you can't really tell if we've been successful in using less energy or not.
You wouldn't be wrong there. Anything else? All in favor, receiving it? It's carried. Now we have the 9.4.1. Moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Craven, that Township of Mapleton Council received for information fire report FR 2022-12, the monthly communique. Chief, talk to us.
Just our monthly communique, we call it, to update everybody on what's going on. Just to highlight a few things. Our cruise road again tonight, we started a smoke alarm program going door to door in Drayton Moorfield. We have done the country before a few years ago. Tonight's our fourth night doing it. We are finding alarmingly that 1/4 of all houses do not have working smoke alarms at this point. When we do 40 to 45 houses a night, we're finding 10 to 12 places we have to put a smoke alarm in or a battery or do something to make them comply by the time we leave. And so I think the average a few years ago used to be like 4 or 5%. We're getting over 10% right now. So we're going to keep on knocking on doors to get that message across. And that's what we're doing right now as of tonight. The other thing I want to update is an advertisement for our pancake breakfast and for Fire Prevention Day this Saturday, 8 to 11 at the arena. We are having a lot of competition from other places having other events going on, but we hope to see a good crowd out and we'll continue from there.
That's actually a good eating day on Saturday. You're starting out with a pancake breakfast, then we go over to Moorfield for the seniors luncheon, and then you go back to have the Foodapalooza. So it's a good eating day on Saturday. No cooking at all. And thank you for the communique, Chief. And of course, we can't forget the former Chief Tom Walker and his passing, and that's in there as well as, and then we have here retirement of Adam, who was, how long was Adam with the department? 11 and a half years? 12 years. And where'd Adam go? Is he just moved out of the community?
He's just for his work and his family's got 4 children now. There's different things you have to take care of. They need time to train.
Okay. Well, we thank Adam for his service for 11 and a half, 12 years. Now, I also have the honor of congratulating Chief. Chief has, as of January, will be 40 years in the fire service this January, but he just last week, 20 years as Chief of Police, or Chief of the Police, well, Chief of the Fire Department, sorry, Chief, I don't know what you want to be. What do you want to be today? But 20 years service, Chief, and thank you for that 20 years of being the fire chief, and really appreciate the time you spent, almost 40 years come January, and 20s, Chief, you must have a lot you want to tell us.
It just, it reminds me of 20 years ago. The reason I know it was 20 years ago is Thanksgiving weekend in 2002, when Tom Walker retired as fire chief, came to CAO and said he's had enough, or he's gonna pack it in. So the CAO at the time called Bill Cummings and I into those two chairs there, and she sat across there and said, Tom Walker's now left and need somebody to fill in for a couple months. That we're gonna have to find somebody, and so we're gonna have a fill in. So said to Bill Cummings, he said, I'm retiring from my job, and in a couple of years, I'm not gonna do that, take that on. And so kind of said, well, will you do it for a couple of months? So I did do it for a couple of months, plus 18 more years and 10 more months. But yeah, it's been interesting for sure. Recruiting people and bringing people through the ranks has been really, really great.
Well, thank you for your couple months of service.
Yeah.
Been a long time. But Chief, on behalf of council, thank you very much for 20 years as chief. I really appreciate that. And I know that it's been challenging at times, and I'm sure all the councils you've had have been challenging with a bunch of them too. We do appreciate it. Any members of council want to say anything to the chief at this point? There's a couple of you that may have had some fire experience. Councilor Craven?
No, except that I haven't been going to the fire hall now for a year and a half. But when I left there, I could tell there was certainly a different attitude than when I got there. And it's partly because of Rick and his being able to bring the two departments together to be more than one than two departments.
Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, congratulations, Rick. You know, volunteer firefighting is one of those things that, you know, it's a special calling, right? And locally, you know, the level of service that your department provides, certainly for the bill at the end of the year, compared to, you know, an urban center, is pretty dramatic. And, you know, every single one of the guys and girls that are on the department, you know, clearly sacrifice an awful lot of time. And, you know, your leadership in that department for the length of time that you've been there is certainly something to be commended. So congratulations on your tenure.
Anybody else? No pressure. No pressure. Chief?
I do think, I don't know if anybody's seen the W5 program last Saturday night after the news, but they are hitting the volunteer fire departments right on the head with trying to get people, retain people. It's becoming a problem with people in small towns working in big cities and maybe not having the time to spend doing volunteer things. And so it is something we have to really work on for sure.
And Chief, you did, that's not just locally here, that's right across Canada. I know I've talked to, in my travels, when I go around the country, I often stop at fire departments and they're having the same issue. So we know that we have a good service here. We certainly appreciate all the men and women that work for us in the fire department and help protect our communities. So moved by Councilor Martin, second by Councilor Craven, that Township of Mapleton Council receive for information Fire Report FR 2022-12 monthly communique. All in favor? That's carried. Recreation Department 9.5.1 moved by Councilor Craven, second by Councilor Martin. The Recreation Report REC 2022-09 dated October 11th, 2022 regarding Mapleton's before and after school program. Maryborough Public School be received for information. Amy, you're on.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Unfortunately, this isn't the positive news story that Recreation likes to bring forward. We have tried very hard to make a go of our program in Moorfield at Maryborough Public School. We, as you're aware, the surveys all indicated that there was a need there for the before and after school program. The county supported it. The Ministry of Education supported it with giving us the extension to run the extended day. That is an application process as well. but registration has dwindled. Our opening numbers looked great. We knew it would be a smaller program in comparison to what is happening in Drayton, but it's just not cost effective for us to continue running the program. Our hope was to possibly just put the program on hold for the remainder of this year, as the RFP with with Upper Grand is for a few years at a time. Unfortunately, after speaking with them in the last few days, that's not what they would like to have happen. So we will be looking at, if the program doesn't grow, completely closing the program this year. That's not to say that the rec department wouldn't want to pursue it again as Moorfield grows or the need arises. But unfortunately, at this time, it's just not fair to ratepayers to continue offering the program with the amount of children that are currently there. UGDSB just asked that we are fair to our families and that we give them ample time to find alternative care. So we have agreed on a timeline for that. I do feel like we will be very fair to them and help them as much as we can. Our hope was definitely with the success of summer camp and everything in Moorfield, our PD days always fill up, camp filled up, that we would see an increase in registration. But that has not been the case. So we wanted to make sure that council was aware of what was happening there. Drayton, on the other hand, is continuing to grow, and we are now entering a wait list, which is fantastic. And if that wait list grows, we could look at opening a second room there for the after-school portion of that program.
Thank you, Amy. Now, I noticed today there was a social media push again.
Yes.
And so what's our date that we have to
So
cut
we,
off?
yes, so through you, Mayor, we will be making that call by the end of this month. We're hoping, still holding out some hope that we will recruit a few more families that are looking for care or maybe are finding some challenges with their current care to come our way. Hopefully that will happen. If not, we'll make that decision at the end of October.
Thank you. And we've been pushing that out social media wise. I know Ally and Amy have been working together to get that out there as much as possible. And it's very important that we do that. And I'm really hopeful, like you are, that families will come forward and we can keep that program running. I'd hate to lose it. Councillor Ottens.
Yes, through you, Mayor. What is the minimum number of children needed and how many do you currently have?
The minimum that I like to see to have the program be viable for us with one staff is 10 children in care. We initially started with 12. We are currently down to just 2.
Another couple of families with a bunch of kids. That's what we need. Councillor Craven.
And thank you, Amy, for doing this. You've done a fine job. I don't know whether I should say unfortunately or not, but there are a lot of seniors in town that don't have kids going to school. So the likelihood of not being enough kids is very, very likely. And I know a lot of midnight ladies walk their kids to school and pick them up in the afternoons after school. And those ladies don't need before and after school care. So there just isn't enough people that require it. But thank you for what you've done anyway.
Councillor Douglas.
Just wondering through you, Mr. Mayor, if we know the reason why we went from 12 to 10? Sorry, 12 to 2.
Amy.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Douglas, each reason was individual. So there was several families that, a few that just enrolled as what ended up they let us know was their backup plan should their sitter fall through, and have made other arrangements. Some have actually moved, and working from home became another one that was big too. We lost a couple families to situations where their parents were able to work from home and make that schedule work.
Thank you. Anybody else? So all I can ask council and anybody listening out there in the world, when you see the posts, please repost, please look for friends, neighbors, relatives, anybody that needs care in Moorfield before and after school. We have a great program. It's a fee subsidy with the County of Wellington. We have everything running well. The staff are great. So thank you, Amy. All those in favor of receiving this report? It's carried. Number 10 is approval of bylaws. Resolution moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Craven. That bylaws number 2022-056 being a rating bylaw imposing special annual drainage rates upon land in respect of which money is borrowed under the Tile Drainage Act. Be hereby read a first, second, and third time, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. Any questions, comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? No correspondence for council's direction. There is correspondence there for council's information. Do you have them there? Any comments from council on any of those? Seeing nothing, moving to item number 13. Notice of motion. Item 14, notice of provision. The Committee of Adjustment meeting and the Parks and Rec Committee meeting there, both canceled. Item number 15, other business. Anything for other business? Okay. And then we'll go to item number 16. Moved by Councilor Martin, second by Councilor Craven, that the Township of Mapleton Council move into closed session to consider the following subject matter: review and adoption of the closed minutes, September 13, 2022, and personal matters about an identifiable individual, municipal employee. All in favor of going to closed? That's carried. We're going to take a 10-minute recess and then we'll move into closed.